So we're talking about the two levels, the two deists, the two opinions, basically, the Das Elyon and the Das Tachten, the upper view, which is the view from above, that the real entity is above, and whatever is below is really considered to be of no value at all, has no comparison to Hashem. And the other view is that we feel ourselves as an entity, and we just recognize that our source, we call it ayin because it's not comprehensible. So that's why it's ayin. And both of these deists, these two views, are basically legitimate, as we're going to continue learning today. It's explained in the Mamorim, Tishto hadeyos heim emes. Both of these views, these two opinions, are true. Dishtayem yesh lahem shoydesh ba'atzmus oid ein sof. They both have a root in the essence of the infinite light. Why? Because the ba'oid ein sof yeshnom shnei inyonim. In the infinite light, there are two aspects. We say about the Ein Sof, we say shehu lemailo mailo adein kates, that he's higher and higher without an end, endlessly higher. And we also say vishehu lemato mato adein tachlis, and that he's low below until there is no end at the end. Ushnei imyonim ela. These two aspects, these two parts that we say that it is higher and higher to no end, and it's lower to no end. So the higher are the representatives. They're the shoyresh. They are the root, the Das Tachten and Das Elyon of the lower view and the supreme upper view. And that's what we say, they are rooted, both views, in the Ein Sof. Explains. Shemitzad hagilui de Ein Sof, from the perspective of the revelation of the Ein Sof, shu begilui bechol mokem lamata mata adein tachlis, that it is everywhere revealed. It comes down everywhere till no end. So that means that kula kamei kilei choshev. Everything next to Hashem is considered like nothing, is no considered. Therefore, he comes down everywhere. There's nothing to block him. There's nothing to stop him. He comes everywhere because there's nothing below which is of any importance to say that he can't go there. He goes everywhere. That's Das Elyon Shalamata Ayin. That's the view and the opinion of the Supreme, that below is nothing. So there's nothing blocking. He can go everywhere. So that's from the Gilui of the Ein Sof. And from the perspective that the infinite light is hidden, which means that he elevates in his essence higher to no end. going up in his own higher and higher. Hanivroim heim b'metzias yesh. So over there, the created being are in an existence of an entity, and das tachten shalamata yesh. That's the view that in the below is an entities, because there is the obscurity of the Ein Sof, the fact that it's mis'ale lemailo, then the nivroim arayesh, and that's the das tachtus umata yesh. That's explained in the Mamorim. The Rebbe brings down, this is from the Mamorim in Sefer Mamorim Tofresh Ayin Ches, and in the Mamorim Tofresh Sadi Ches. So we need to understand this. The kivon shegam das tacht shorshu ba'atzmus Ein Sof, since that this view of below, that lower view, is also rooted in the essence of the Ein Sof. Harei hashleimus the das tachtun hu l'cha. So what seems to be, what would make das tachtun wholesome? Sheyiye boy begilui the zeshalamata yeshu, that it should be revealed in him that lamata is a yesh, because this is part of the atzmus ein sof, that lamata is a yesh. What he means to say, as he explains, loy shehanivroi mitzad atzmom hem mitzias yesh. We're not trying to say that he should feel a yesh because a created being on his own is a yesh. Elo mipnei she'oirein sof hulamai lo adin ketz, because the Ein Sof is higher than Ketz, which is mis'ale ba'atzmusei, which brings about the mitzias yesh. That's why he feels himself. So he should feel that level of mis'ale ba'atzmusei. That should be the advantage, because it's shodesh is in atzmus that he is a yesh, not to feel himself a yesh. So, but Ubadrushi Mevur, in the Mamorim, it's explained Shahashleim is the das tachten, that what makes the lower view wholesome, who alidei shemeir boy hagilu the das elyon, is by shining in him the revelation of the das elyon, that lamata is ayin. Why should he not feel that lamata is yesh? Because that's also in the source, in the Ein Sof, that it's a yesh. On the other hand, we have to understand this fact that he writes in the Mamorim, Shagam das tachten hu emes lifi sheyesh loy shodesh ba'atzmus ein sof. It's true because it does have a root in the atzmus ein sof. That makes it true, because there is a root for that. There's a source. But it would seem kivon sheha inyan delamaylo maylo adin ketz. Since that aspect, that it's higher and higher, no end. Hashodesh the das tachten, which becomes the root for the das tachten, who hahelem the Ein Sof. That's the obscurity of the Ein Sof, that it's misalim ba'atzmusei. Harei hahergesh de lamato yesh. So why does the below? Why do we feel yesh? As it's felt with das tachten. It's not because of the Ein Sof, because the Ein Sof is being obscured. It's because the Ein Sof is not felt. And yet we say that this view that below is a yesh as it is in the das tacht, the lower view, it's true. So you're trying to say that the reason why it's a shoydish of das tachten is the helam of Ein Sof. So how do we, who feel ourselves as a yesh, not because we realize that the helam of atzmusay, that's because we don't have a feeling of Ein Sof. How can we say that this is true? That's not a true yesh. That's not the true das tachten. The shoydish das tachten doesn't seem to be. Our hergish of a yesh seems to be because of the lack of Ein Sof, not because the helam of the Ein Sof is felt over here. So he asks here both questions. It seems like the reason, the goal is to have the Das Elyon and Das Tachten. Why do we need Das Elyon and Das Tachten? Why don't we just have these? The Das Tachten itself is rooted in the Ein Sof. Why do we need a reveal within the Das Tachten itself? That's question number one. And question number two, that l'cheira, the reason we feel a yesh is not because we sense our shoydish that is helam b'atzmusay, but because we are lacking Ein Sof. But you can see that these questions answer one another, really, because that's why we need the revelation of the Ein Sof, even though that's the shoydish, but needs to be explained. If the shoydish is helam b'atzmusay, but that's not really, if we don't feel that, then it's not true. Why do we say that they're both true? Because we don't feel that helam b'atzmusay. We feel ourselves a yesh because of the lack of it. And if it is because we need the Das Elyon to be there, how are we saying that we actually have a shadish in Atzmus? That's why it's true. So he's going to explain. So what is it? The say the Mavur B'Hadrushim, it explains in the Mamorim the Beteva Kama Pirushim, that when we say the word nature, the Hebrew word for nature means teva. So there are several interpretations. It's going to bring down three interpretations which have really three applications. The B'Shailas Utshuvas Chacham Tzvi Isa, in the responses of the Chacham Tzvi, we find the Shem Teva Hu Shem Chodesh Shechitshu Chachamim Ha'achronim. The name nature is a new name which was founded, it came up by the later Chachamim. There's really no such a thing as nature. Everything is divine. There is a open conduct in which you see the miracles, Hashem's conduct, and then there is a conduct which takes place all the time, Hashem's conduct. We call that nature. The kivon shahakoil gam hateva hu mi'ito yisborich, since everything, including nature, is from him blessed. Haragam hateva unes. So the teva is also miraculous. It's a miraculous coming from Hashem. So, but what is it? It's a constant, a miracle that happens all the time. Nisim ritzufim, consecutive nisim. The fact that it's consecutive nisim, we all of a sudden call it teva. So basically, teva is another word for consecutive nisim. You have it all the time. That's why it becomes teva. But it's a continuous nice. That's one opinion. V'yesh omrim, there's another opinion, and this is from the Mimer uses like that. There's another view. Teva hu meloshen matbeya. That teva comes from the lotion of a coin. The Isa of the Mishnah, we find in the Mishnah, Odom toiveya kamo matbeyas b'choisem echad. You can coin many coins with one seal, one stamp. You stamp each coin, and you have one choisem. That means a matbeya. The coins are stamped with one choisem. B'kulam deim zelazeh. And they're all similar. You use the same stamp to create it, so they're all similar one to the other. Umelech malche hamlochim HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the king's kings, the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, tova kol odom b'chaisoma shel odom harishon. The Eibishter coined and put the seal of the first man in every human being. But ve'ein echad mem doim l'chaveiro. But one is not similar to the one another. So basically, a person makes a stamp, but they're exactly identical. The coins that come out of there. The Eibishter put everyone in the stamp of Adam HaRishon, but people are not similar. Everybody's different. So that's the second. Ubetanya Isa, and in the Tanya we find the Teva Hushem Hamushal, that the word Teva is a borrowed name. L'chol dover she'enoi al pi tam vadas. Any matter which is not based on reason and understanding and rational is called Teva. If you're doing things not based on reason, rationale, it's just naturally sort of, that's called Teva. Teva is called nature, natural. What does it mean? How does these three interpretation talking about three different aspects of the way we apply it to the human being? We have three parts of nature in ourselves. We have one part as explained by the Chacham Tzvi, another part as explained in the Mishnah, and another part as explained in the Tanya. Let's look. Mavur Badrushim. So he explains in the Mamorim, the Gimul Pirushim Hanal and Gimul Inyonim, that these three interpretations are really three different aspects. It's not a different interpretation on the same, but each interpretation represents a different aspect. The Lepirush Chacham Tzvi Shetavo Nisim Ritzufim, according to the interpretation of the Chacham Tzvi, that a nature, that Teva, nature means continuous miracles. Shem Teva Koi Alan Hogasoilam. So the name nature is talking about how the world is being led. We say Teva. The Teva is the nature. The nature of the world is constantly miracles, but it happens all the time. That's called Teva. And according to the interpretation that Teva is like a coin, that Hashem coined each person in the seal of Adam HaRishon, Opirish HaRambam, and the Rambam says, so what is the seal of Adam HaRishon? What kind of a seal is it? What kind of a chosem is it? Opirish HaRambam. And the Rambam explains the chosem shel Adam HaRishon hutzuras min ha'adam. That's the shape of the human species. What does it mean, the shape of the human species? Asher bo ha'odam ha'odam, in which what makes a human being. That means that seal, that coin that was coined, what means that the fact that a human being, makes him a human being. What part of the human being are we talking about? We're talking about his soul. What is the intent when it says that he shaped, that is the shape of the human species? Mainly, we're talking about the shape of the soul that makes a human being, not his body, but rather his soul. So, Shem Teva, Koi al Chachayis Haliki Sheboilim. So, when we take it into the world, we're talking about the godly energy that vitalizes the world. According to the Chacham Tzvi, we're talking about how the world runs by Teva. According to the Mishnah and the Rambam, the Rebbe brings down here, we're talking about the godly light, Chayis Eliki Sheba'olam, Shehu Nefesh Olam, which is the soul of the world. Just like we say, by the person is the soul of the person, there is the level of Teva, which is the soul of the world. What is it in the godly energy in the world, which we call nature? Why is that nature? So what's the connection between that godly energy, vitality in the world, to simply the meaning of Teva, of nature? So it's ki hatziur v'hateva because the shape and the nature of every created being is according to the way of his godly life, that godly energy that he has. That makes up the person. So that's the nature. That means nature, that the godly light is the energy of the nature of the person, because that's the natural. So we have the actual running of the world, we have the godly light of the world, and then we have the third rule, pirush, shetava shem amushu l'chol davar she'ene al pitam hadas, that the word teva is a borrowed name. Anything which is not according to reason and knowledge or an understanding, logic, Shem Teva Koi al Koyach Haliki. The word Teva goes on the godly power, Shemahave Kol Nivra Ma'ayin Liyesh, that creates him. Before we're talking about what vitalizes him after he was created. The third level in Teva talks about the godly power that creates, brings into being, called Nivra Ma'ayin Liyesh, every created being, from ex nihilo into existence. This idea is considered to be not logical. The hishavus Ma'ayin Liyesh ilamaylam haseichel, because creating from ex nihilo, from nothing, and making into an existence, that is beyond intellect. That's l'mayla min haseichel, that's above seichel. So that's called not the level of reason, that's level of teva. And it's not like the vitalization, this is creation. The fact that the godly light, godly energy vitalizes the created being yesh loze mokim b'seichel, that has space in the intellect. In other words, there is understandable the intellect can understand vitalization from the godly energy. But the inyan teva, but the idea of teva, lahapirush, according to the explanation, sheteva huzeh she'ein al pitam b'das, that teva is something which is not based on reason and logic and das. Hu b'isavus hanivroim. That's talking about the creation, bringing them into being, the creations. The beriya yesh me'ayin hi lamayla ma'aseichel, because creating an entity from nothing is beyond seichel. That's why that's the third tribe. Again, so what are the three pshatim? What are the three meaning according to three interpretation? Whether we talk about the actual conduct of the world, that's the pirush of the Chacham Tzri. Whether we talk about the godly vitality which energizes the world, which is the second pshat, the level of Teva, the level of the Mishnah, or whether we talk about the godly force that creates the world, which is totally beyond logic, and that's according to the Tanya, that it's not according to Tavadas. So it's explained in this Mamorim, Dishnei hapirushim hoinyonim b'teva. These two interpretation, these two aspects in nature, we're talking about the godly vitality and the godly force of creation, which is the godly vitality which vitalizes the created being. One. And two, Vishahu HaKoyach Aliki, and that is the godly power, Shemehaves HaNivroim Ma'ayin Liyesh, that creates the created being from Ayin into Yesh. Shayochim Lahapirush Shetava U'Meloshen Tvia, they are connected to the interpretation that the word Teva comes from the Loshen to sink in, to drown, to sink in. As we say, Tubu b'Yamsuf, Teva the Tubu, they sunk in the Yamsuf. Sus v'Rochvei, that they, that it says Mitzrayim, that they drowned. In Bishalach Tazvav Dalet, similar to Tubu b'Yamsuf. Tubu means sunk in. So these two are related to that idea that it's sunk in. The kamoi, what's the connection? The kamoi shebetivia kipshuta, just like when you drown, or when you sink in, literally. Kshedavar nitva b'mayim, when something sinks into the water. Hamayim mechasim al hadavar shenitva bohem. The water covers the matter that has been sunk into the water. The same thing is that godly energy that dresses up to vitalize the created being. So that gets covered up, just like the item by the water, that gets covered up by the creation, that you don't see that vitalization, that you don't see that godly energy. The created beings, they cover on that godly light which is dressed up in them. So that's by the godly light that vitalizes them. And also, similar is that godly power that creates the creation from nothing into existence. That what is the idea of Teva? The Inyan HaTeva Shaboy, the idea of Teva, and it is Hukam Meloshin Tvi, is also from sinking in. The kivon sheha his havus. He beoifen the helen vehester, since the creation is in a way, in a manner in which it's hidden and obscure. That power that creates hides and leaves hidden in the nivroim. That's why we also apply the lotion of tava as sunk in and obscure. So in both of these parts, in the chayis eliki that vitalizes, and in the chayis eliki that creates, you don't see in the creation, it is hidden. That's why it's like tubal v'yamsu, just like the yam covers, it covers over here too. But in the Maimer, the way the Rebbe says it, it seems like this is more obvious in the case of the chayis eliki than in the case of his havus eliki. Why so? The Rebbe explains it now. That the language, it seems like it's more easier to understand when we talk about the chayis eliki. We can say the haltam al zeh sheha'inyan de teva meloshin tvia bishavus hanivroim. Why is it, the reason, why is it that this idea that teva comes from the language that it's sung? So when we talk bishavus hanivroim, when the nivroim are created, muva b'hadrushim b'signa shel chidush. The drushim brings her down in a style. Oh, that this is a novelty. There too, we can say that it's in. Here too, we can say teva loshen tvia. Why is that not the same as by the chayis eliki that you don't see? Also by the savus eliki you don't see. So the Rebbe wants to explain now why there is a more of a chiddush by when we talk about hisavus. Bein chayis hanivroim lishavus hanivroim, because of the distinction between the vitality of the creation to the and the creation of the nivroim is the chayis haliki shemechaye es hanivroim hu begilui b'hanivroim. The godly light that vitalizes the created being, it's open in the created being. Which means, what does it mean? It's begilu. It is felt in them that they have energy, they have that vitality. So what don't they feel? And the reason why what's obscure is only that they don't feel that that vitality that is within them is a godly energy. But these havus and nivroim shenivru ma'ayin liyesh. But when we talk about that, the creation of the nivroim shenivru ma'ayin liyesh, that they were created from ayin liyesh, ein nirgash b'hem. They don't feel at all. The loy rak sheloy nirgash b'hem shayis havusim elikus. Not only is it not felt in them that they're brought into being comes from godliness, they don't even have the feeling of creative being at all. They don't feel it. Why is it that they don't feel it? The godly vitality dresses up in them through garments that hide, that obscure. But the kivon shu, therefore kivon shu melubesh b'hanivroim, And since it's dressed up in the created being, that's why he's felt in them. But because of those garments that obscure, you don't feel it's a godly chayes. But the chayes itself you feel. But the obscurity you don't see it's godly. But that godly power that creates the created being, that is separate from the created being, and is not dressed up in them. And that's why in the created being you don't feel their creation, because it's not nislabish in them. He's moved on. So they didn't even know his chayes also. So can't therefore say so much that it's sunk, that it's covered. It's not felt at all. So based on this, we can explain. That the idea that teva is from the lotion of sunk in, it's mainly the vitality of the created being. Why? Because what is ki'inyan hatviyahu? Because when you say you sink something in, it's in the water. That means the item that was sunk in is in the water. And that's through that, because he's in the water. That's why the water covered him. What is in the example? It is that the godly energy, the vitalization is dressed in the created being. That's how they block on him, because he's there and he's covered by them. That is when we talk about the chayes and Ibrahim. But what is the obscurity when we talk about in the aspect, when we talk about the idea of creation? That is because the power, the godly power that brings them into being the creation being, that's just because he's separate. He's not dressed in them. So he's not really there in the water, like by the water. He's not even there. It's separate. So why do we call it still teva? So what's the idea here? Sangin is benegeya. When we talk about the power of creation of Hashem, over there, it's mainly, we're not talking about that it's obscure, not in the way of Helem, that it's like an item in the water. There's no item there because you can't see it all. But we're talking about the obscurity, is talking about just because you don't see it, but not so much how it's Helem. That is more applicable when we talk about the chayes aliki, not by the ishavus aliki. And that's why the Mamorim bring this down also as a chiddush for the teva, because the main idea of teva really applies to the chayes aliki and not so much to the vitality of aliki.